So we have people joining slowly. I think we'll get started in just a couple more minutes and we'll just hang out till then as people start to join. Okay, cool. All right, I think we're reaching critical mass. So I'll go ahead and get us started. I think everybody who's attending and certainly the people who are the residents know who I am, but if you don't, I'm Emma Saperstein. I'm the curator of the Harold J. Miosi Art Gallery and co-curator, facilitator of Inverse Performance Art Festival that hosted this summer's residency, along with my colleague and friend Cynthia, who is here as well. Before we get started on this informal conversation reflection on the summer residency, I will kick us off with a land acknowledgement. I know some of you are not present in San Luis Obispo, so you can be thinking of your own land acknowledgements, but since many of us are based in this county, that is the land I will acknowledge. So the Harold J. Miosi Art Gallery gratefully acknowledges that our gallery rests on traditional lands of the coastal band of the Chumash Nation, including the Abispeno, members of the Chumashan language family, and any other native tribes who made their homes along the west coast of Central California. As a step towards acknowledging and honoring this sovereign nation, our organization pledges a commitment to Indigenous rights and cultural equity. Since we have gathered digitally, we will be honoring the Indigenous people whose land many of us are physically gathered on. We do this as a way of acknowledging the people who were present in San Luis Obispo as the past, present, and future caretakers of the land. We recognize that achieving healing and reconciliation will be a long relationship with sustained commitment. But with this land acknowledgement, the Harold J. Miosi Gallery hopes to raise awareness about histories that are often suppressed or forgotten. So we're here today we have just wrapped up, or we're in the process of wrapping up the last week, the third week of the Inverse Summer Performance Residency. Obviously this year it was different than it has been in the past since we hosted it pretty much entirely virtually. And we wanted to give both our residents who have participated an opportunity to sort of reflect together on the projects that they're working on, as well as for those who are listening in to sort of hear a little bit more about the residency process. And we thought our reflection could be made public to the general audience. So Cynthia and I will talk a little bit about the residency and how it was structured, and then we'll hear from each resident about the projects that they've developed. And then I encourage those who are listening in, particularly past residents, I see a few names who are former residents. If you have questions or you want to ask questions of the residents, feel free. But please give lots of love and support to our residents in the chat, and I will be sharing momentarily the link that has either a description of their performance if it is not happening publicly, or the schedule of the Instagram live performances that will be happening over the next few days. Cynthia, do you want to give us a little overview of what we've been up to the past few weeks?
Yeah, so as many of you know, Inverse has existed since 2016, and it's really a collaboration between Emma and myself and our regions, our communities and worlds in California and in Arkansas, where I'm based. So this residency has always been really dear to my heart because I usually get to come out to California, but because it was virtual, it was still 3 weeks. So we did a 3-week residency, and we invited these artists as well as some of our colleagues and artists we're excited to work with to participate in a series of workshops and conversations, and ultimately working towards this idea of a final project or a final focus that culminates in a performance, whether it's on Instagram Live or, as Emma mentioned, some of us are doing private performances. So we got to work with Kristen Clifford, Deborah Oliver, Lena Chen, as well as host some performances by Ayanna Evans and Sadeh McConan. And the residents really participated in some pretty deep and experimental processes throughout the weeks of thinking about performance and action and gesture, and really being able to research some of their own interests.
Yeah, one benefit or pro of working in the virtual space is that we were also able to sort of widen the pool. So typically when it's an in-person residency, we can really only work with residents who are local to San Luis Obispo, since the residency is hosted by Cuesta College and the gallery, the Miosi Gallery. But it was really exciting for us as we were accepting residents into the program to imagine that we have Brigitte, who's living in Paris, we have Triz, who's in Madrid, Erica, who's in Arkansas. I think everyone else is local, but it's exciting to be able to sort of work with other communities outside of just the local community, and build connections and intersections between local artists, aspiring performance artists, and the rest of the performance world. I also wanted to just say that under typical circumstances, when we are hosting the residency in person, as Cynthia mentioned, it culminates in this exhibition at the end. But one thing that I personally learned through the process of doing it virtual is that there was a lot of value and emphasis happening in the very intimate performances that were happening in the workshops, in the conversations that happened. It felt like that was the real work of the residency, and the final projects are, while very important and we're really excited for them, it kind of like the culmination happened at ongoing rather than this final big show. I think it's an interesting way to work and to think about performance, which was exciting. I also wanted, go ahead, Cynthia.
Sorry, to further that, I think, in a conversation that's been happening a lot in this virtual space is really like, what is performance without an audience present in physical space, and is it still performance art? And I think, it's challenged Emma and myself in conversation around like how we define this, but also thinking about each one of the residents and the way that you're thinking about performance, performativity, performative. Like, there are these really beautiful elements that really speak to what we think is really important about this residency and about performance in general. Is like, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be a performance artist or that has to be your focus, but that performance enriches so much of whatever type of practice you have. That really, I think that this opportunity and being forced into this virtual space has really allowed us to think through that and research that in a different way. So I think it's benefited the residency as a whole in a way we weren't expecting.
Absolutely. I think too, I'm going to share in the chat for everyone who's listening in. So the first artist that we worked with, Cynthia mentioned, is Kristen Clifford. She came and performed at Cuesta in February, but she also teaches at the New School and has a really huge breadth of experience both in teaching performance, in practicing performance, in her own work, and writing about performance. And so I just shared a link to her work if anybody's interested in exploring it. But I think she really helped us, even with the limitations of the virtual space. There was lots of like moving and getting in the body and all that good stuff that happens when you're in a performance workshop, typically in person. Like, she was able to really extend that to all of us individually in the virtual space, which I think is really important. I also, one other thing I appreciated about her is her, Kristen's ability to like really rah, like being an artist as like something that is a really valuable contribution to the world, and sort of a commitment that we all owe, and that she really emphasized with our residents that they all owe to themselves to follow through on. And I thought that was a really inspiring and helpful way to think about performance as well. I think Deborah is here, and so I'm going to share just a link to her bio. But Deborah, if you can hear me, you can also share a link to the festival or the Irrational exhibits that you run. But the second week, we got to work very closely with Deborah Oliver, who is working in a very similar way that Inverse is working in LA, where she works very closely with artists to develop a final project exhibition. And with Deborah, that week, I felt like even I, who I think I know a lot of performance artists, I was like really grateful to learn either new things about artists that I already knew about, new aspects or ways to think about their practices, or artists that I had never heard of or engaged with. And so I think all the residents and Cynthia and I left that week with Deborah as with like a big list of artists to think about and to look at, which I think was really helpful and interesting. And then the third week, we worked with Lena Chen, who really focuses on ritual in her work, but also I thought it was really helpful to think about this idea that she presented to the group on performance aftercare. Like, don't go to work at 7 a.m. the next day after you've performed, and performance spaces as really being like very raw spaces for processing and for emotion, and making sure that as artists that you're protecting yourself and making sure you're taking care of yourself in the ways that you can after that, and each other. So that's definitely something that I think we want to integrate into future residencies as something to really talk about and think about.
Well, and it was really great to work with her again. For anyone who remembers, she was part of the residency we did this spring, virtually based, but hosted in part with the Momentary in Arkansas. And it was the first time we got to work with Lena, and so we were really excited to work with her again for this, and instead of a resident, being more of a facilitator.
Yeah. So one thing I just want to say before we sort of hear from each resident on what their projects they're working on is that I think something that unexpected that came out of the residency happening in the virtual space is this question of who is performance for. As we've already mentioned, working towards a final show where you don't know who's going to show up and all these people and all this audience interaction, I think it's really, really interesting and actually quite practical to think about performance as like a real tool during COVID, during a time where we're all home, during a time where audience is inaccessible or only virtual, and the choices that some of the residents here made to step away from sort of performing live virtually. Oh, hey, Lauren, she's here, awesome. Some of the choices that the residents have made to step away from performing live virtually, but performing for a small group of friends, or performing for just one person, or not even performing for anybody, but performing for themselves and creating ritual around performance, I think is a really interesting thing that came out of this. I'm trying to think if there's any other context or overview on the residency that I want to give before we jump into talking with each resident.
I think maybe some things will come up as we start to talk.
Yeah. Well, so now I'll just pick on people, and if you want to wait till the end, you can just tell me. But now I just like to hear from each resident about what your final project looks like, what you're working on for a few minutes, and then we can talk further. So Hannah, you're the first on my screen, so I'll call on you.
Hey, so this is my second year being a part of the Inverse residency, and I just want to extend a huge thank you to Cynthia and Emma for including me both years, because a year ago when I started this, I used to call myself an aspiring artist, and I have gained the confidence to now call myself just an artist. So I'm really, really blessed to be a part of this community. And so the project that I'm working on this year is about reconnection. And I wanted to do something really positive because of the circumstances that are happening in the world. So I wanted to focus on reconnection. So I changed schools 8 times growing up. So I've met a variety of people from across the United States. And I reactivated my Facebook and I reached out to old friends and asked them if they wanted to participate in my piece. And I did get some really positive responses. I actually had some turn downs. They said we hadn't talked in a while and it felt fraudulent. So I think getting both sides was a really important part of the piece. And so I sent them a handwritten letter and instructions, and they're sending me back a piece of fabric and a story about friendship that I will be opening and reading out loud and placing it on the sculpture that I've been working on for the past week during a live performance this next Wednesday on the 12th at 6 p.m. It was going to be this Friday, but since there are people who are participating all across the country, the letters are coming in at different times. So I'm just hoping to get a few more letters back.
And I'll post the link. Thank you, Hannah, for that very eloquent description of your work. I'm gonna post a link right now, and I will do it again since it's easy to lose things in the chat. But on this link that I've just shared, if you scroll down to 2020 Residents and Projects, you can see Hannah's project and her Instagram handle where you can tune in. I believe it will remain online for 24 hours after it's live. So if you can't make the actual time, please check in. We'll also be updating this page that I just shared with documentation from each project. So thank you, Hannah. Justine, I see you next.
Hi, thanks Emma and Cynthia. I am going to be doing a performance tonight at 8 p.m. It's going to be an Instagram live performance. So I'm a fairly regular drag performer, like a drag king in the local queer community here. And so since COVID, I've done only like 1 or 2 maybe virtual shows, but with this project, I'm really interested in exploring what the kind of neat little boxes drag puts gender in and performativity, and how to shatter those and reconstruct them and expose the kind of like arbitrary nature of gender and performance and performativity of gender.
Awesome. Yeah, and just repeating so everybody can go that Justine's performance is this evening at 8 p.m. And their Instagram handle is on the link I just shared. So tune in if you can. Nikki?
Hello. These past few weeks for me have been really exciting to reconnect back to connecting with other performers. I'm a very active burlesque and drag performer in the area, and I've had like so much disconnect with other performance artists this year due to obvious situations. And the piece that I am making for the end of this these 3 weeks is really exploring kind of what is a performer in a virtual space, and how is there an ability to have that same transcendent connection to an audience when you're alone in your own space, but someone else is watching you still live. So playing around with ideas of how to showcase a before and after a performance in an honest way, and playing with how I can showcase myself as a performer virtually.
Awesome. Thank you, Nikki. And Nikki's performance is tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Instagram as well. Linda?
Hi there. My performance piece, I'm just going to read a little short blurb on it because I don't want to forget what it is. My goal is to take a common American ritual, a birthday celebration, and look at the significance of it in my own life and that of a handful of other people. Because rites of passage rituals mark time, making life transitions complete. My hope is to provide a forum to examine how a single common and recurring ritual individually intersects with personal well-being. So just a little bit about myself. I'm a person who does a lot of celebrating, helping to celebrate other people's lives. And one of the things that in the pandemic, as we all know, people have had to change these life rituals. And it is a bit, as everyone knows, unsettling, and we hang and flex. And so my piece is about how this intersects with our lives and what we're going to be developing in the future, or thinking about, will we ever have the same past, and adapting to these new rituals that are coming down the pike. So that's pretty much what it's about. And I just wanted to add, I wanted to say thank you to Emma and Cynthia. It's been a great experience. This is my second year working with Inverse. And the two experiences have been very different. Last year, our performance culminated in everybody being in one location together. But somehow, despite that, I still feel like we've created great connections through Zoom. And I have to say for myself, who can be rather shy about revealing things personally, there is a safety in this space that maybe I wouldn't be taking advantage of if it weren't the way it is. So I just have to say that both elements, live and remote, have really had great benefits and has opened my eyes to how I can use media in my practices. I'm mostly a 2 and 3D person, but now I have millions of new ideas based on the technology that I've learned in these last 3 weeks. It's been challenging, but it's been great.
Linda, you can't make us collectively start crying until.
I'm sorry.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Brigitte, would you like to share what you're working on?
Yeah, I would like thank you again for this opportunity, and I am really very happy to be collaboration with you. And I find the virtual form which was necessary to be an interesting element, and I work with this theme further, the theme of physical and virtual being, communication, and human and technology. I asked myself the question whether it is possible to evoke the same emotion in a spectator as in a face-to-face performance. For me, a performance is a force vibration that vibrates the viewer. During the residency, I also wondering about the language barrier and the barrier in communication in general. This also is a topic in my final performance. Since I don't have any experience with virtual residency, nor with virtual performance, it is a huge challenge for me. And the workshop was very interesting because of the workshop I could try on online performance for the first time. I hope to prepare such a performance for I think 14 August, that it has the same power as a personal contact. Whether that is possible is a big question. And in my performance, Disconnect to Connect, I thank for the possibility of distance communication. However, at the same time, I challenge to look for our intuition. This is my topic for my final performance. It will be live on Instagram.
Awesome. We have not updated that link I shared with Brigitte's time, but we will as soon as we finalize it, as well as the Instagram that it'll be hosted on. Thank you, Brigitte, for sharing. Brigitte and Triz, by the way, deserve like major claps from everyone, because the workshops were all at noon Pacific, which was, you know, in the evening. Rujita has a child, and, you know, it was very admirable how they rearranged their schedules and their evenings to be with us. We also had performances, you know, events that happened at 5 p.m. Pacific that they showed up for. So I'm just very impressed at the commitment, and it's been great to work with and widen our performance community. So thank you. Erica.
Yeah, so also Emma and Cynthia, thank you so much for including me in this residency. I'm a performance artist who works primarily as a theater artist in immersive and site-specific work. I'm currently working on a project for my company, the Artist Laboratory Theater in Fayetteville. And the play is called The Good Person of South Fayetteville. It is a site-specific production that takes place on the bus, and we go to locations throughout this particular neighborhood, a laundromat, the woods, a residential home. In lieu of doing that in this year, we are postponing the theater production and taking the script and deconstructing it so that audiences this fall and winter will experience the narrative, the plot line, the play world, and the topics in the play through remote performances. And so this residency actually coincided with my schedule on this project. And so I actually just started working on the first performance track. And so these 3 weeks have been, you know, attending the workshops, which have been really inspiring and rejuvenating, and like just filling up that well that I needed, because I'm working on a project. So to receive everyone else's work and to learn from and to be inspired by my cohorts has been just nutritious for my process. So I really appreciate that. I'm writing right now with an actor and a scenic designer. We're creating an instructional score for a one-person audience. And it is a score that we lead audiences through emails, text messages, social media engagement, leading up to a final one-on-one performance with a particular character in the play. I'll be making many of these performances, and then in November, we will make them public. And so for 3 weeks, there will be a window where The Good Person of South Fayetteville can be experienced in this way. And so, but I've been working on the track with an actor. We devised the piece, it's very ritual based. So one of the elements of the play is there's this fantasy supernatural world, mystical world where goddesses are the status quo religion. And first goddess, you are attending a very special event when you show up to this one-on-one Zoom performance. So that's the premise of this particular track. I am tonight doing a demo performance with the actor, and a friend is going to stand in as the audience. And then until the 15th of August, I'm going to be doing this several times with different people to get feedback and then to keep working. This is considered a sketch of the performance, and we will do a couple more sketches and then we'll put it on the shelf, and then I move on with the next track. So that's what I'm working on. And we'll, and also I should say that I've asked people to sign up to be a part of this audience, this one-on-one audience, but I will continue needing these audiences to experiment with all the way through the end of September. So I believe there's a way that you can sign up and get on a list and be a part of our experiment.
Yeah, so again, I'm just gonna keep posting this link. information on how to sign up to participate with Erica, which I really encourage you to do. I think if you choose to do so, you'll be surprised and delighted at what can happen in the virtual space in theater and performance. So please think about it. I sent out to several people I'm seeing who are here an email about your work, Erica. But it is also on this website. There's an email address that you can email to get put on a list for her. But if anybody has questions about how to do that, you can also reach out to me and or Cynthia, and I'll point you in the right direction. I'm really excited for Erica's project. Thank you, Erica. Silas.
Okay. Hello. So I did Inverse last year and did a very interactive piece. So it was a very different challenge to work in the virtual realm. And I ended up doing it very personal. I just performed for myself. I actually performed for my grandpa, like in my head. So yeah, I've been working with the idea of reconciling my queerness and gender nonconformity with family history and traditional blue-collar male roles that have influenced my life, whether that's like in a good way or in a traumatic way. So I moved in with my grandma after leaving SLO, so that kind of caused this flood of new ideas and like things I haven't had to think about in a really long time. So basically I found this frame that my grandpa built in the 70s because like they couldn't afford to buy a picture frame at the time, and it was really broken. And I just took it down to his old shop and just like turned some cameras on so I had possible documentation, and really just tried to like be with him, but also try to fix this problem in front of me that I have no idea, like I've never built a picture frame before. And I ended up doing it, and it's kind of a little off, like not a perfect frame, but I think this has definitely helped. This is like an exercise in this longer body of work and this concept I'm going to deal with. So I'm really grateful for this opportunity to kind of spark my creativity again because of Inverse. And I think Emma and Cynthia, whoever wrote the description on that page, like described it way more eloquently than I just did. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, when Silas and Cynthia and I, so one thing that I didn't share that we always do with all the residents is, we have one-on-ones where we just talk about their practice, their life, what they're interested in developing into a performance, if they have any ideas already. Residents always come to the table with like varying levels of ideas. Some say, I want to work kind of around this, or I'm interested in this, but I don't know, I don't have any ideas for actions or performances related to that. Some come with like really clear, crisp ideas that need a little bit of refinement sometimes, but they already have a sense of what they want to do. And it's always, I think for me personally, like the most delightful part of the whole process is getting to talk so closely with students and residents about their work and their lives, and think about, there's so much in every piece. Like I feel like we could have a 1-hour conversation with each resident about their piece. That would be really fascinating. But when Silas and Cynthia and I met one-on-one, both Cynthia and I were like, okay, this is going to be like a 2-year, like this is a big project, and we were really excited that Inverse, the residency experience, could be, help support the early first stages of that. So I'm stoked. Luke, do you want to share a bit about your work?
Hello. Yeah, so my thesis going into it was experiencing catharsis and reconnecting my past self to my current self. And I just moved back into my childhood home, which has kind of remained unchanged since I left for Cal Poly. And since I'm back after I graduated, I kind of wanted to kick up some dust and kind of go through old things. And my idea in general was to sew a quilt out of items like memorabilia that I found. And I ended up finding specifically tons of stuff from the years 2012 to 2014, which were very tumultuous years for me. And then so I ended up getting a lot of memorabilia and like finding items that really evoked strong feelings. And I also ended up finding this like vessel that I built in junior high. And so when I was sewing together all these items, I was writing down affirmations for my younger self, and like giving myself like notes to like my younger self, which is something that I do in my head, but I thought I'd make it more ritualistic. And then I actually, after I sewed it all together, I like pinned it to my bed sheet, because it was like this kind of like half full size quilt, and I like slept with it on, and like put the note in the vessel, and then like put it at the foot of my bed. And so it's something that I'll probably do like a couple nights in a row until it like something sinks in. But yeah, it was a really interesting experience. Was not expecting to find like that much catharsis. So definitely something I want to like keep working with. And like, yeah, it was interesting like thinking about like Silas also like performing for someone else that wasn't really in the room. So I was like performing for like my parents and myself in a weird way. It's very interesting. But yeah, thinking about the home, like a home-based practice was really interesting.
Awesome. And I also, I mean, I realized that I shouted out Brigitte and Triz for their participation, but everybody participated fully in a virtual residency during a global pandemic when there's a lot of anxiety and stress in the world. And I was, you know, Luke was graduating from Cal Poly and moving during this residency. And I really want to applaud all of you for your ability to show up right now, because it's hard to show up right now, and you all did so fully. So thank you. And Luke, I'm so excited about your work. I think we lost Triz, but maybe she can rejoin. So Lauren, shout out to Lauren, who pretty much joined, she got off work and joined most of the sessions from her car. And she's in LA County, so it's like not hot in the car, as she's participating from her phone in the car in all of these workshops and events that we put on. So Lauren, do you want to share a bit about your project?
Yeah, sure. So thank you, Emma. I don't know if you guys can hear me. Sometimes the internet has been really spotty sitting from my car. But yes, my name's Lauren. I was an intern. I was involved in the inverse residency last year as well. And it is different this year because it's virtual, similarly about everyone else who has shared already. I have a primarily 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional process, and I kind of use this residency to think about the themes that I'm usually interested in, and really kind of challenging my body in terms of endurance, or really just making it more of a physical experience. Nostalgia, a lot of humor and playfulness, and even like melodrama. And I've been thinking a lot about play, especially because the timing of this residency, I've actually been working with children in person amidst the pandemic at a child care center. And I work with 5- and 6-year-olds every day. So I'm coming to you fresh from working with 5- and 6-year-olds this morning. So playfulness and being outside and on the move is really a part of my life right now. And so for my piece, I decided to take my childhood journals, or mostly they're from my middle school years, very cringy. And I took them and I walked around the streets of the kind of the neighborhoods I grew up in, and used TikTok, this popular new social media platform, as my way to document the experience. And I don't know how familiar everyone is with TikTok, but you can film in 15-second increments. So I gave myself a ritualistic kind of task or score where I would walk and publicly read these private journals aloud. To then, after those 15 seconds, I would eat probably the most nostalgic and listen to all the music I had on my iPod at that time. So it was kind of this back and forth tension and balance between reading this kind of personal information that also didn't really mean anything, and then also having like a public dance party with chocolate pudding. But I did make myself kind of read all of the journals front to, cover to cover, which meant that it actually took me about 8 hours. I ate way more pudding than I'd like to share or ever eat again, and walked about 11 miles. So it was really a test of endurance, which was really interesting to have a really, really kind of physical aspect to my practice. But I also kind of edited the footage together, and it's in a video, and you can check that out if you'd like as well.
Yeah, Lauren has already completed her project for Inverse this year. It's on the link I shared. It is fascinating. And it made me I was in my closet the other day, and it made me want to, and I saw out of the corner of my eye like my box of childhood journals, and I was like, what would this look like to translate what Lauren has done with like this item of food and this engagement with her journals? Like, what if that became like a script that other people should do, like a ritual that I need to do, where I walk around this neighborhood and read aloud from my journals? So it was exciting to think about that. Thanks, Lauren. And I think, Triz, are you with us, or are you able to share about your project?
I think now, yes. Well, the first thing I want to say, like, thank you so much to Emma and Cynthia, because it's been a great experience. Also, for me, it's been so special to be accepted in this American residency and be with American artists and see this. We're very far away, so these different ways of looking and of thinking and of practicing our performances, it's been very special for me, and I think it was a very rich experience. And so about my final project, well, during the first weeks, I really think about, like, okay, I came from theater and I experiment a little bit with performance, but in this opportunity, I really want to do a piece using like performance art in a very pure way. And then in a moment came the topic that was forgiveness. So that is my piece, forgiveness and performance art. And yeah, like I think like something that is very special for this piece is how the workshops and the conversation with all the people and the artists that came here, how make this piece grow up, and also the personal conversation between Cynthia and Emma. And about the format, I don't feel that it is an obstacle to be virtual, because for me it's also interesting that I can do something for American people that I'm interested in, because I'm Spanish and it's not something that I can do usually. So it's for me, it's funny to think that something so bad, that is a pandemic, give me this beautiful opportunity.
Thank you, Triz. We haven't updated since we're still determining the time of your piece, but to everybody, I would just go ahead and bookmark this page, since we'll be updating it with everybody's projects, and keep checking back so that you all can engage with all the residents' work. I think that's everybody. We can open it up for some questions in our last few minutes. So anybody who's listening in, if you have any questions for any of our residents or for us, we're here. I think Cynthia has prepped a few questions to kick us off.
So I'll start us off with one of the topics that we've been thinking a lot about, and Emma mentioned in the beginning, but really it's this idea of public and private in the virtual space that I think, like Triz just mentioned, you know, there's been some really interesting benefits to being so virtually connected around the world. You know, I can attend a talk somewhere else on my lunch break. You know, I found it personally interesting how I can attend that talk with someone who maybe daily presents themselves in a very professional manner, and yet here I am getting to see the inside of their home. And maybe, as I don't know about you, but I'm wearing sweatpants right now. And so like there's this like, over time, we kind of have like our layers of identity have kind of merged. And I think that there's this like intimacy with this public and private space. And I think, you know, we actually have experienced some things that make us question this room and with this audience, whether this is public or private. And so I just kind of wanted to open it up to talk about this. You feel free, anyone, if you want to talk about the public and private elements to your own performance, or something else you've been thinking about, your experience in general. Nikki, I see your hand already if you want to go.
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting how in this time we've really lost all second and third spaces, which I think I really relate to my third space being like venues and, you know, queer events where like I'm performing and I am a performer in those spaces. And like I, at the same time, don't necessarily identify with the idea that performance is just a completely different identity than my identity away from public spaces. And so I think like it's interesting to try to simulate a process of getting ready for a show and like coming down from a show, and even just like sharing all of our spaces like we do in Zoom and be like this is kind of honestly who we are. And I think the public is now in our home basically more than it has been before.
Hannah,
go ahead, Anna.
So yeah, I agree with Nikki, and I think allowing the public into our homes, even though it is a virtual space, is something that is important, that needs to happen in the art world. I would like to see eventually like emerging of the general public with the art world. Like why? Because what I've learned in college so far is that there's so many people who have been afraid to attend art galleries or like afraid to attend shows or like go to museums because they feel that it's not meant for them. But in reality, art is meant for everyone, and it's something that we should share, even if it is remotely or in person. And I think having this platform this year is going to allow those people who maybe don't feel safe going to like an art show to feel safe going forward in the future, especially when things do start to open back up again. So
go ahead, Linda. Thank you, Hannah. I was just going to say that you're totally speaking my language, and I think many of us identify with that sentiment. And at least I'm really excited in our local San Luis Obispo community to continue to explore together, both with residents who are here and in the general community, about how we can make art more and more accessible and really be radical in the ways that we're thinking about that. So I appreciate that insight. Linda, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think that in almost all elements of life right now, we see hybridization. We had a huge discussion at my home about education and how it's changing, and is the future going to ever hold the past? And I talked with a lot of people about that. And I have my own opinion. I can go on and on. But the thing about art that I see is I think we as artists are always trying to push the envelope and be the cutting edge and, you know, put those new ideas out there. And I find that this merging, I mean, I find it highly exciting, quite frankly. You know, I probably would have gone on my life painting in my garage or something for the rest of my life. And this whole need to still communicate is, to me, like one of the best and freshest things. And I always feel like anytime we as an artist take on a challenge where it's making us do outside of our comfort zone, I think that's what we need to do to improve our practice that makes it alive and fresh. And so conversely, if you were in media and somehow you're interjecting a whole new thing, like you're going to paint now or something, it's always that new that's pushing us forward. So I think that as a medium, it's confusing, it's interesting, and it's really alive. I think it's really, really like an organism that is going to grow into some really great places.
I want to say one thing. Yeah, like Cynthia started this topic talking about how this platform allows us to perform in our intimacy. But like a part of that, like for my final piece, it's exciting because I will perform in a waste ground. So it's like with 2 cameras and probably, no, not probably, I will do it at live. So it's like I can do something at live, and it's not a film, it's not video art, it's something that is going to happen at live, but I can make you move to this place, to this kind of set. And it's like when I'm going to do that, it's like in the sunrise here in Spain, like at 6:30 in the morning. So what I'm talking about is like also this media allows to mix this thing of set and a specific place. It does not have to be just my home, my intimacy, but at the same time I can do something at live, like is happening right now. And I think that is a very huge opportunity to explore that. So there's like what I'm saying, that there are a lot of options, not just my home. Like, yeah.
No, I appreciate that, Triz, because I've been really inspired by the way that all of you have thought very, very differently about how to develop a final project in yeah, super, super different ways. And I think that it just, you know, I can't remember who said this quote, but there's something about like the ability of contemporary art to like survive and to rise to the occasion and to still be incredibly transformative and creative, no matter, like artists have been making work forever under all sorts of crazy circumstances. And so it only makes sense that a brilliant group of residents like yourselves are able to come up with really interesting ways to use this time as fodder to continue to like make and express and put out into the world what needs to be in the world. So I'm going to stop because I'll get emotional.
Lauren, I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit, the public and private, since you're dealing with the private and intimate memories and thoughts you had as your younger self, and then, you know, exploding out into a public space, and then the like kind of like the unknown of like no one else really knowing what you're doing or why.
Yeah, so I just knew that I wanted to challenge myself, and I hadn't read these journals since I wrote them. And when I wrote them, there's even like clips. It's a very long video, but if you do sit through the whole thing, there's a couple clips where I mention like writing in the journal. I hope no one finds this, even though I wrote about like what I had for lunch that day, like cold pizza. And so I hadn't read them since the time I wrote them. And so I didn't know how personal it was going to get. I did decide right off the bat, because I was going to put on social media, that to protect anyone's identity, not to like be too revealing and make that decision for them, I replaced everyone's name with the word pudding. So when I would mention anyone, I would just say pudding as their name. But to get back on track with your question, I just knew it would be challenging to walk around my town that's not very big. I might see someone that I know yelling these things that are deeply personal. I wanted to challenge myself, and I also thought it was interesting as someone who uses social media, who uses Instagram, who's around kids at these schools who are up through 6th grade that are using social media, and they're so concerned about how they're being presented. And we share so much on social media. It's such a great tool.
I think we're losing you.
Oh, sorry. Is that better?
Yeah.
If I don't sit in the car, it's a little better. So I'll stand outside. It's a different thing to also then put on social media. And I thought that part of it was part of their life. To imagine, we've all kind of seen someone taking a picture clearly, like to post on social media. That's kind of like a funny thing that we've normalized. So part of it was doing that action. Part of it was taking the private to the public space, and then also posting it on a public platform and not announcing that it was for performance art. I was actually getting a lot of comments from random people on TikTok asking if I was okay, and tagging their friends, and it got on the For You page apparently, which is like the trending page. So I don't know if I actually answered your question, Cynthia, but there's like so many layers to the public versus private. And I also think it's interesting because I was walking down the street by myself, so I kind of was alone. But then it kind of gave me some freedom, but then I also kind of was controlling like the view. So people who were maybe like on their bike next to me could kind of see everything going on, but there's this cool ability where you can really control what the viewer is seeing because you're using a camera. So there's so much tension between the public and private, and it made me really digest and analyze what we post on social media, because sometimes it's a picture of our lunch, and sometimes it's about like our pet dying or like someone getting diagnosed with cancer. So there's such a huge spectrum of the public versus private, the mundane versus the really important that gets put on social media that I wanted to explore, but I keep blabbling. I think that's kind of maybe I hit something.
That's great. Thanks, Lauren. I also wanted to extend that, Silas, if you wouldn't mind talking for a few moments about the public and private and how you feel like that's relating to your project and this new exploration you're taking on.
Yeah, I think a lot of my previous like performances have been like public and in physical space, like about me taking up physical space and like having physical interactions with people. So it was really interesting to like kind of let go of trying to make it work virtually. Like I've done Instagram live performances too, but this time to like you asked the question, who is this performance for? And I'm like, really, like this part, like this exercise is for me, like no one else. I don't know, like people can always like pick up pieces that resonate with them, but like performing for myself, I found it was probably like the most emotional performance I've done, just because like, I know I learned a lot more and was forced to focus on my like interactions with the environment. And I don't know, it was very different than like trying to relate something to like an audience, and more like just document a personal experience. And it definitely helped me kind of recenter myself, like of what is performance? Like, do people have to see it? Like we're talking about, like, what if I just like went and worked on a boat and like analyzed masculinity for 3 months, and that's a thing. Like, so I think it really helped me like broaden my perspective of what is performance. Like, do I need to fit in this box? Like, yeah, Instagram Live is super popular and a super awesome way to perform, but like, do I need that for this specific project or idea? Like, you get more control about like your space and your surroundings, but also like what parts of your performance you want to make accessible to the public. So I think it really helped me just think in a way I hadn't thought before. If that answers your question, I think it does.
That's great. Anybody else wanna chime in on this question before we wrap up? We're just about at time, but before we drop, I just want to do one last plug for everybody's work, for everybody who's listening in. I hope that you all can engage the residents' work at some point over the next week or so. I also really just want to applaud all of you for your work and your commitment to this process. And me and Cynthia often message back and forth, just like glowing and freaking out because we're so honored to be able to work with you in this way. And I think on a broader scale, just super like, this is what the art is for. Like, this kind of conversation, this kind of work, this kind of engagement with yourself and your soul and your communities and your past. Like, this is the whole point. And it's really amazing to be working with all of you who have like already knew the point and engaged in that so meaningfully. So thank you all so much. Thank you for everyone who joined in. We're going to be posting this conversation on YouTube so other people can also witness it. But Cynthia, did you want to say anything else before we wrap up?
I would just thank you all. It's been, like Emma said, everything Emma said and more. It's been really incredible to work with you and to be part of your processes and to see where you go next. And also, yeah, Emma put the link, but for our audience, please come and visit the individual residents' Instagram pages, handles, follow everyone, and look out for future performances by all these amazing humans.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining, and thanks to all the residents, and we will see you very soon. So take care, everyone.